My theme song, bro.
Oh, okay.
Gotta have a theme song, man. Gotta have a theme song. Gotta have a theme song, man. For those of you out there on Facebook, those of you out there checking on Podbean, we're about to get started shortly. So welcome to another episode of Above Average Black Men. Great show for you tonight. We got Devin squeezing in here. Great show happened tonight, man. I am flattered, man, and honored to have my brother here, man, Pastor Alonzo Johnson. Welcome you to the house, man. We are glad to have you here. So let me start, as we always do. I introduce myself. You know me, Chris Pender Sr.
Devin Pender, happy to be here. Happy to be alive. Like, follow, subscribe, share, and comment.
Yeah, we got to get that part up, man, because everybody I talk to keeps telling me, yeah, man, I listen, but we can't get them to like, follow, subscribe, man. But tonight we got Pastor Alonzo Johnson here tonight, and tonight we're going to be talking about the school to prison pipeline. And I got all kind of feedback when I said that, because there's, of course, millions of opinions about that. Everybody has a theory, and everybody thinks there's not a solution. But without further ado, I'm going to let you introduce yourself, and we jump right into this.
Okay, thank you so much for having me. Alonzo Johnson, pastor of Believers Bible Fellowship. I've been knowing Chris for probably close to 20 years or more, and I'm honored to be here to discuss this topic tonight. I'm looking forward to it. I have been looking forward to it, and it's something that I've just been part of the fabric of my life since I started getting involved in the public schools with Urban Family Council, working and co-laboring with Chris Pender. So I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah, so let's start. You left out an important part, man. What you do, where you work at, man. That's an important part of the conversation.
Well, I'm bivocational, and this year I'm the assistant principal at Wagner Middle School in the West Oak Lane section. I was the climate manager, essentially over discipline matters at Central High School for 2 years. And then I went from magnet school, one of the best schools probably in the city, to now a school that has some unique needs at Wagner Middle School. So just starting this year as the assistant principal.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's important for the conversation, because it kind of it gives, not that you needed it, but it gives credibility.
That's right.
Because every time I get engaged in this conversation, especially when I bring up something people don't have a response to, what's your qualifications? Especially people who look like us. Like, wait a minute.
That's right.
5 minutes ago, this was an engaging conversation. So my first question to you, let's give, what you describe your opinion of the school to prison pipeline.
Okay. Well, I'm coming from it's personal to me, and I didn't understand the term until I was involved in church planning in a Frankfurt context of the Northeast section of Philadelphia. And I started volunteering and doing things in the public school. But it is personal to me because when I got to the third grade, I was unable to read at a school called William Dick Elementary School. And what I learned is that our educational system is not prepared to catch you up once you can't read. And what they do is they build the prison industrial complex based on the number of children who can't read, because they think it's more likely that if you can't catch up and you can't read by third grade, then it's more likely that you're going to do something that's going to land you in prison. So they began to create these spaces for incarceration in our country rather than figuring out how to correct the problem, which is when a student can't read. I was fortunate enough to have a fifth grade teacher, Miss Johnson, and a stepfather who dedicated themselves to giving me the ability, or instilling in me the ability to read, which opened up many worlds to me. So Miss Johnson's goal in William Dick was that I would graduate with the basic fundamental of being able to read a book. Because in the third grade, I was holding it upside down. I was lost in class. And when you can't do that and you walk into a classroom, you begin to get into behavioral issues. What happens is people begin to get suspended. You get detentions. You begin to get labeled as a bad kid. But what's happening is you just don't understand what's going on. And it's documented that when we look at the disciplinary process in a lot of Philadelphia public schools, minority children get more of the infractions than other students. And so what happens is a pipeline is created based on disciplinary actions, the fundamental issue that children are falling behind academically. We have a problem with our public schools. And then what happens is you create a system where students end up in prison over time rather than going to college or into a trade school. And what we have to do is do something about that. Now, what we do about it is the question.
No, I mean, that was an excellent description. And I think one of the things is I think a lot of people don't realize that that's actually taking place.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a lot of people who are ignorant to that is actually transpiring, especially those who were caught up in that cycle.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I was having a conversation today. I had lunch with a judge today because we're talking about doing some things, and that was one of the things we were getting into was kind of unpacking it. And he asked me the same question that a lot of people ask is, you know, well, what's the solution? Can it be fixed? And I think that's the problem right there. That's the problem right there, because, you know, we need to be coming up with some kind of plan to fix it. And it starts with schools.
That's right.
And it starts with schools. And it's not just the education in schools, because I want to get your opinion on this. A lot of times we say it should be happening at home. We know it's not happening at home now. So my opinion is, why aren't we teaching in school? Why don't we have character education? We should do this. Talk about integrity. Talk about choices and consequences. We know it's not happening at home, but yet we keep saying. Mm-hmm. So what's your thought? And you get to see it from two sides, because you get to see it. You're in the fight. Mm-hmm. You know, somebody gonna be defended when I say this, but a lot of times, especially pastors, they're not engaged. So they have these pie in the sky, you know, things that they think is going to work. We're going to go on there and sprinkle holy water. Everybody's going to come to their senses. And, you know, they want to come around. White people say they just need Jesus. You know, I hear all this stuff. But I know on Sunday you gave an excellent analogy we talking about on Sunday, and we'll get to that later. Mm-hmm. So what's your opinion on that? How do you think we start peeling back the layers? I know it's not going to happen overnight because it took a long time to get here.
Mm-hmm. Now, you have to remind me of the number of students that we stood before when we were in the public school system.
3,500 in 3 years.
3,500 in 3 years. And representation matters. So when you have a group of men, especially African-American men, going into school and we're talking about character issues, it's just a powerful statement for a lot of those students because they're learning academically some of the things in a classroom. But when you're standing before them and you're talking about life issues, and we're talking about why sex was created, we're talking about the importance of family. These were foreign things to those students. And so we got to model manhood when we stood in the classroom. But it's much deeper than that, because what we need is more collaboration. So partnerships like Urban Family Council, partnering with the school, then partnering with the family. And as a community, we can help reach many, many children if we are actually building a place where children feel safe. Frederick Douglass made this statement. I believe it's a quote from Frederick Douglass. He said, "It's better to build strong children than to repair broken men." And it seems like we haven't put our resources into to building strong children, to helping them to grow in these areas of weakness. Rather, when you get to the place where you're a broken man, it's hard to recover from that. Yeah. And we have this word we call rehabilitation. Prisons don't do rehabilitation very well. I would say that even some of the programs that exist outside of prison that's supposed to do rehabilitation doesn't. Well, that's why I like Jesus, because he doesn't just do rehabilitation, he does restoration. And if a man is restored, that means some things have been repaired or restored better than what they were and when they were broken, because he doesn't just do something haphazardly. He does it better than what it was before. And so when I was broken and messed up on drugs and got involved in things, what Jesus did was one better. He fixed what was broken inside of me. And what we were doing, we were teaching those character issues. We were dealing with what was going on in the heart of those students. And when we were reaching their hearts, what we were doing is helping those educators to see that it was more than just about education, because students really didn't think the teachers cared about them. When we went through and we stood before them, I believe they got the sense that we genuinely cared about them. And I heard a statement that said that children or people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Yeah. And so we have a disconnect in a lot of our institutions right now, where we just think students are supposed to come, sit down, learn. you just instill something in them, and then they can matriculate through the public school system. Well, if they don't have a strong home base, that's just not going to happen.
Real fast, you brought up the behavioral classes and everything like that.
Mhm.
Was there ever really a thing like that, like back in the day when you guys were coming up? Because I can't recall like that happening when I was in Cheltenham or seeing anything like that. And that was Cheltenham.
Yeah,
It wasn't like,
Yeah, it was called a
it's
yardstick, a ruler, a plan. The board of education. No, I think, and I want to welcome Chris, man. Welcome, man. How's the weather down there in Baltimore, man? Oh, that's right. You in Texas now. I forgot. I'm like way off the map.
Mhm.
Okay.
I can't hear you.
We can't hear him.
Yeah, it can't. I don't know, maybe little technical difficulties.
Right, you keep talking, and I'm gonna see why we don't.
Okay, you're gonna try to get it connected.
But like I was saying, like I never really noticed thing like that when I was like going to school. So like, was there ever really a thing back in the day? And like, did you use that to base it off of what's going on now?
No, I was just involved in the church as a youth pastor, and I knew we had to do more than just the students that came into church on Sunday morning. I knew it was bigger than that. And so when I got introduced to Urban Family Council, I thought this is going to be amazing because they had a ability to get into schools to do that. But when I was in school, there wasn't a lot of that happening from my perspective. I don't know, was it happening when you were in school, Chris?
I'm sorry. Can you hear us,
okay.
Chris, now?
I think he can hear us.
He
but
can
we can't
definitely
hear
hear
him.
us. I'm reading lips right now.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I asked you a question. You all the way over there. But no, that didn't exist, the answer to your question. When I was coming up, we just had old heads hanging around, talking about life issues, barbershops, philosophizing when you sat in there for hours and hours, but not anybody intentionally coming into the schools to address these glaring issues that were going on in our lives at the time.
And it's funny because I remember, especially with like Urban Family Council and everything, you guys doing these different workshops and everything. How would you implement that like into today's society where sometimes these kids got to grow up a little faster?
Mm-hmm.
So like, how would you set that in today's time period if you had the chance?
That's a good question. Very good question. Well, Chris was the president, and I'm sure he had some ideas about how we would incorporate that today, because we now have to be about 2 or 3 generations in the children that we were talking to at the time.
Yeah, we definitely are.
So
that's me, Chris.
Yeah, I know, I got it.
Yeah, excellent.
That's definitely. Well, I think how would I incorporate it now? It's funny because I wouldn't do it, and Ron talked about this last week. Ron mentioned last week that he felt like we weren't aggressive enough. I don't think in the question how we incorporate it, because it's the same. I think we were ahead of our time in what we were doing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what made it so unique, because we were ahead of our time. And caring is caring, whether it's 1950, 1960, 1970, 1980. And I think that formula works more now today than any other time, because there's so many adults who don't care. We have teachers who talk at them, who don't listen to them. Parents who talk at them, don't listen to them. There's a lot of not caring, and because of that, we see what we see now. So I think the method really wouldn't change. Our approach may be a little different, because music and media has changed. Go ahead.
I was going to ask about that. Like, because to Devin's point, things have definitely changed. I do feel like kids nowadays, they got to grow up a lot faster. They have access to a lot more information at a fast pace. Like they're constantly getting information from all of these different places. So, I mean, I would love to kind of hear a little bit more as to like, do you think the approach is a little bit different today? Like, do you think we need to probably be a little bit more aggressive with, being in schools and being up front in front of them and letting them know that there's people out here that really do genuinely care about them?
Yeah. I would say yes. Like I said, I went from Central, and it was a need at Central, although Central was more diverse, to predominantly all Black school at Wagner Middle School. But the students there are longing for, like 60% of the students at the school that I'm presently at have had some form of foster care, meaning that the 60%. Home is just literally just destroyed. They have all kind of supports. They have therapy supports. They have counseling. They have all these letters behind their name, these IEPs and all these different things like that, all these supports to try to help them. But I do believe the one thing that they're missing is somebody standing in front of them trying to talk to them about these character issues that you were just talking about. So, yeah, I think we need to go hard in the paint, because if not, you talked about this technology is talking to them. They're getting these messages coming at them many times a day about what life is about. In fact, the PNB rock situation, their ears are to the ground with everything that's going on in the culture, you know what I mean? And it's teaching them something. And I think they need another voice, and it's missing.
But I think the what's missing is the relationship.
That's it.
Every school we went into, we built relationships. Mm-hmm. You know, we knew kids by first names. It wasn't hey you. Mm-hmm. You know, what's the name? I'm sitting over here. You know, we knew names. You know, they saw the way we responded to each other when we agreed to disagree. So I think that's the part that's consistent over time. I think it's just like the gospel. The message doesn't change. The method changes over a period of time because we got to audience. I think so. What we did is still effective. I still use a lot of those tools today.
That's right.
You know, I still use a lot of those tools today. But I think what's missing is people generally caring enough to call people out on their stuff.
So when do you think that changed, and what potentially kind of changed that? Because I know kind of growing up, it was already kind of said here, it's do as you're told. And as a kid, it's like, you know, we don't ask questions, we just do it. I think like now, it's a lot more, they're inquisitive. They're more willing to talk back. And then even from the teacher perspective, I feel like that's a little different nowadays too. You know, I growing up, felt like I had teachers that cared, that were like, you know, but now I think it's more, this is a job. There's something that I don't want to say teachers don't care, but like, you know, some people know like I'm here to do this 9 to 5, and so I'm like, where did that change? Like,
but I think,
and like, how do we get back to those things? It's
like any infection. You don't wake up and have an infection. It takes time.
Right?
And before you realize it, you know, stuff is, you know, in you, and then it manifests itself. That's what you're seeing now. Mm-hmm. You're seeing stuff that built up over a period of time. And I said this last week, and, you know, you've heard me say it. I said this today when I was talking to the judge today. You know, what you see now is the results of 20 years ago when they said they were going to stop investing money in high schools. Remember how hard it was for us to get money to service those kids? It's not worth it anymore. They pulled the plug on us. You know, it's not worth it. We're going to invest in the younger kids. The problem with it is those kids that we ignored, they're parents now. So they're parents of the kids we're dealing with now. Mm-hmm. And to your point, that's a whole generation that's been raised on, you know, remember, that's the cutting edge social media generation. Mm-hmm. You know, they're not into books and going to libraries. They're listening to stuff. They're looking at stuff. Mm-hmm. And this is the way they're raising their kids. You got to remember, you're dealing with a generation who they manufacture cultures. You wake up you go to sleep on Monday, wake up on Tuesday, and it's another culture. Wow. So they have kids, and I think the pipeline it's such a great job has been done about hiding it, about camouflaging it. They started with the debate, and I remember, you know, maybe Ron's not watching, but I remember I went to Ron's class, and we got to this debate about prison being a modern day slavery. Mm-hmm. And everybody has different opinions about it. My thing about it was slavery, they came and got you. They came, took you away from your family. Not all, but most of the prisoners volunteered for that. Mm-hmm. And I think when that whole conversation started, all of a sudden, you know, it took it away from what was happening, these not being educated. It came down to the penalty. Mm-hmm. And it came all about discussion, became about the punishment. Nobody talked about, you know, the shark bite that you put a Band-Aid on. Mm-hmm. You know, nobody talked about, well, you know, how many of these folk are coming to prison that's totally illiterate. You know, I watched something real quick. I was watching something last week. They arrested, and I think I was telling you about this earlier. They arrested and I was wrong with the number. They arrested 100 and something people in a weekend. Wow. Hold up. Out of 100 and some people they arrested, they have 500 and some charges.
That's insane.
They had 22 and they had 22 felons. One dude had 3 felons, and he's still walking the street. Yeah. And he committed his third one. So we've taken it away from that. And what society has done is says, we can make money off this now. But I want you guys to argue about something that you're never going to change, about this whole mentality that is modern day slavery, instead of how do we get prevention? How do we stop kids from feeding it? How do we stop kids from going to jail? How do we stop kids from becoming a part of the system? And we've never tackled that issue.
Yeah.
I think that's super interesting what you just said in terms of like when we talk about prison and we talk about black men, they're putting us in jail all the time. Why? Like, and where can we prevent these things from happening? And it starts at a young age, and it's definitely tied to education. You know, when you look at probably the majority of these people, like you said, some of them they're illiterate, they can't read, they don't know math. Like, there are things that you could probably look at and be like, all right, if they don't have this by this time, most likely, you know, they're going to be going down a certain path.
But I've sat around a room, I sat around a table with 10 to 15 guys and have those guys tell me the first male authority figure they came across was the judge who sentenced them. Single homes, single family homes, female teachers, female authority figures, got arrested by a female, the first male authority figure, and they didn't know how to act. They rebelled. So that's part of the problem. Until you deal with that, you're trying to, that's like being a fish and raising a fish somewhere else, assuming they're going to know how to swim. We have to get back to the basics. Part of the basics is we know it's not happening at home, so we got to create those environments in school. And part of it, you got to pay your teachers more. You know, any other thing where the product is making a lot of money, they make sure the product is well taken care of. You know, Lexus ain't gonna sell you in the car with ball tires on it. Lexus not gonna have blind people working on the assembly line. You know, we have to first start there. The second thing we got to do is the educational system has to change from a one size fits all. What made us so effective was we brought something different from what they were accustomed to.
That's right.
We created a dialogue. If you remember.
That's right. A dialogue. I remember teachers sitting in the class being in awe when we would sit in and they would have such disruptive class and they would wonder why we could keep the students' attentions and talk about things. I remember one, and it's stuck in my head, which says Ron is an amazing teacher, but we all love to work together. But he was ahead of his time, like you said. He did a conflict resolution on the fight at the Palace in Detroit, and he showed clips of it escalating and began to have discussion around, okay, what did the students see? And then he was able to foretell that, hey, look, this didn't just start with a bunch of players that were hooligans that was on the court. This started somewhere, it escalated somewhere. And he was even able to point out at that time that a lot of people blamed it on Ron Artest. But Ron Artest was taking steps at that time, and we didn't understand it, but he was listening to his therapist. You know what I mean?
But if you go back and look at it, he went and laid on the table.
Exactly. We didn't know why he did that.
But I'm going to tell you,
at the time, we didn't know why, but now we know through 30/30 that the reason he did it is because his therapist told him to take.
What's ironic about it? One of the things that Ron touched on was the impact of music and the culture, and we talked about it. And one of the things that I pointed out, and it's still prevalent today, those attitudes that Steven Jackson, those guys had, came long before basketball. Now, fast forward, if you listen to them now, they still talk the same way. They're 40-year-old grown men, and they still talk about going in the corner, knocking somebody out, and what they would do. And I was watching an episode where they were talking about
Steven Jackson.
They were talking about they were spending $5 to $50,000 in a strip club. You a 40-year-old me, so that mentality has not changed. When you were 18 years old, you had $5. So that's the part I think people don't understand, that you know, you don't suddenly get money, get fame. We talk about it on one of our shows, get a position, and your mindset changes. You know, what it does is it gives you freedom to act like that now.
Yeah. So, but what I'm saying is we were having these conversations because in schools,
20 years ago,
what you have is a lot of conflict with students. They fight each other. They get into fights. Now, when they get into those things in school, they're not handled as assault. So it can start off as a neutral fight, then somebody jump each other. But we have a code of conduct in the Philadelphia Public Schools where you just deal with it according to what the code of conduct. But if you do these things over the summer, you do these things when you're not in school, the law gets involved and it's different. I mean, you can literally get charged. And then if you do these same things, and if you haven't matured, like you said, and now you're adult, but you're still in a 15, 16-year-old body and you're doing things, the law is coming for you now. You know what I mean? Because now you assaulted somebody. You did something that caused somebody grave harm or irreparable harm. And so we try to have these discussions with students about how to deal with these things. And what it all came down to is somebody don't respect you, all this crazy stuff. But we would have these ongoing dialogues, and they couldn't wait for us to come back to pick up, especially when we talked about sex, when we talked about all these things. Nobody was having these conversations with these students. And this created a space where we could now have these conversations, which created an environment of, like you said, it was a dialogue, and they honestly believed we cared about them, because they wondered, why would you be coming in spending all this time in the school? Sorry about that.
No, you were doing your thing. That's fine. Now, I was just curious. Now, when you were, for instance, when you were doing those programs in the prisons, was there like a common theme or like a common message of regret, like they were like kind of displaying towards you?
In schools?
No,
yeah.
In prison.
In prison, like looking back.
At first, no, because how do you regret something that you think is normal? How do you regret something that everybody else around you is doing and has done? How do you regret something that you think you're just a part of the culture? And I think that's the step 2 I was talking about. We have to stop condemning people, even in the church, and start meeting people where they are and walking them through the process, showing them, not just beating them up and telling them, this is what a healthy life looks like. These are what good decisions look like. This is, on the church side, this is what blessings look like. This is, people say, well, how? This is why. Because I had to make the tough choice. But when I first started classes, usually the first perfect example, the first class I had, the first 10 guys that had to come to the class. They were forced to come to the class. Moaning and groaning. By the time of it, you got another workshop, you got more classes. When I stopped doing it, I had a waiting list, man. Folk couldn't wait to sign up for the class. Some of them thought they were coming, they were going to, we were going to do the arguments about Islam and Christianity. They was coming looking for the healthy dialogue, But most of them came because, they wanted to know what I was talking about.
That's good.
Because they didn't know. It's like kids we come across in school, they didn't know it was wrong because, the guy on TV with a suit making 6 figures a year is telling them they're wrong. But I look around my neighborhood, and this is what everybody does. So I think, it's easy to say something is wrong, but how do you help them understand it's wrong, and how do you help them understand how to correct it? I think that's,
I guess the question I had is, like, when do you start having those conversations? I don't know if I've already kind of missed that part where I came in at, but like, I know a lot of the work that we probably used to do. I've done some of that work. It was like high school, but like, do we start earlier now? Like, what age do you think you start to have some of those conversations?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah,
middle school, man.
Yeah, middle school.
It has to be middle school now because, Chris, I shared some of the stories with you, man. Middle school kids would come to me, and I was laughing. I was joking with somebody there about this because they reminded me. Had a group of young ladies, so I brought a young lady in to talk to them about, when that time of the month comes, about how you should groom yourself, proper way to and every week they would ask me the same question: when are we gonna talk about sex? You 10 to 12 years old. Every week, when are you gonna get to the sex part? I'm like, when are you gonna talk about sex? That's all they wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
And they didn't want to hear about how to groom yourself, how to take care of yourself, and what happens when you start to develop, how you, and
that part comes first, right?
Yeah, I thought that was, middle school.
Yeah, but you're in a generation now that everything is sped up.
Yeah.
Everything moves a whole lot faster, except the things that are right. The things that are right still move a whole lot slower. And part of it is one thing that I'm proud of, and you use it. I hear you when you preach on Sunday, and Ryan uses it. Is that we weren't afraid to try something different. Like Sunday when you talked about the 4,000.
Yeah.
Just so I come home and I tear this stuff apart every Sunday. So I'm like, not just digging.
Yeah.
And it's funny because that's the perfect example of what we're talking about. When people don't understand. You can be in the crowd, but Jesus ministers to your specific needs.
That's it.
And I think we missed that in every area of society, even in church. We try to do things as a congregation. We try to do things for a group, for a demographic, instead of saying within that group of demographics, there's individual needs that if you don't meet, you're going to keep having the same problems you're having.
Yeah.
If you're hungry and I don't care what I'm sharing with you, and I put a steak up there, 3 choices are going to happen. Either 1, you're going to die of hunger. 2, we're going to fight over that steak. Or 3, you're going to take it and run. because I got to feed the hunger. And I think it's the same way with kids. We got to start dealing with these issues.
So you touched on something because you're saying, in that passage, Jesus said, I have compassion on them.
Yep.
So he was telling them how he feels about them. And what you were saying is we need to respond to people who have needs differently. And one of the things that we don't understand is like, so what I try to tell when I'm working in an administrative role, even if I'm in discipline, but I'm not in discipline right now, I just support the school as a whole. What I say is I don't do things to students. I do things with students.
Yes.
And what I try to do is have a restorative approach. And I'll give you an example. So been working in the public school system for years. I have no clue what it's like because the things we did were not put out there that will live in a space that will never go away. So I had a young lady one time, had a boyfriend. He got in her head, told her whatever. And she exposed herself in that way and shared it with him. Well, they broke up and then he shared it with his boys and then they airdropped it to the whole school. And she had to walk into that community being exposed in that way. And a lot of times what we do is we re-victimize. We say, well, that was stupid, whatever the case may be. What I had to do is get the right woman or the right staff person around her to walk her through this difficult season so she could learn from it in a way that she would. Now, that's not going to go away. I mean, that's something you did that's going to live out there. None of us could say as an adult that I understand that. Yeah. The stuff we did was not out there. You know what I mean? Yeah. But she can learn and grow from it. And she can know that decision doesn't have to define the rest of your life.
But that's the perfect analogy because, and the more I think about those between the 5,000 to 4,000, I know somebody in that group bought food because they do. Folk ain't going to sit there. Black folk ain't going to sit somewhere all day long and not bring food. And he didn't say if you got food over there. He didn't get into it. He knew I'm going to meet everybody's need by being this one thing. What I mean, and the essence of the young lady, take it the same way. Most schools have an assembly. We're going to have an assembly. Mm-hmm. We're going to talk about this. So the girl going to feel worse because now you got a big old assembly. That's right. Instead of saying, let me meet this person as an individual, let me meet their needs. Because everybody that came in that 4,000 didn't travel a long distance. So, I mean, the way he did it was in such a way that, okay, I'm putting this out there, but I'm meeting everybody's needs, even the needs. The part I really loved about it was his humility because he didn't say, you dumb, stupid disciples. How many times I got to show you? Didn't I just do this? Because I went back and I checked out the passage in a Message Bible, and it says, in another time. I did this in another time. So, so it clearly duplicates that as two. Yeah, but exactly. He didn't say, you dumb, stupid, what I got to do, you saw me walk on. He didn't say all that. And I think that goes back to his ability to minister to people as individuals. I minister to this audience, but I'm also the people around me. And I think we have to get back to the point where meeting people where they are. I have three kids and they're totally different. And I understand it. I got to parent them different. I treat them different. None is better than the other, but I understand it. And I think we have to do that when it comes to young people. Yeah. And my sports analogy, Chris, what I'm about to say. If you got ball players, they all got different skill sets. So even though you train them in certain things, you're not expecting the guy that can't make a layup, to get under the basket and all of a sudden make every layup. The guy who can't shoot 3-pointers, you're not putting him out there saying, with everybody else. So I think we have to go through life with our young people. And unfortunately, we have to start younger. Chris, you said something earlier. We even though they may not get it, we got to include parents because some parents need to be retrained.
That's it. Yeah. That's good. That's good. I wanted to say that in that text you were talking about the 4,000, the disciples asked the question, how are we supposed to get food to feed
in this desolate place?
Desolate place. So they were saying it's not even anywhere around here.
Ain't no Kmart, ain't no Target, ain't no
And I think that a lot of times people are in desperate place, but then God wants to show them something. And I think a lot of our young people, they don't know what they don't know, right? Yeah, and so some of us know a lot about technology, but a lot of us don't. And it was this book. I reached out to this lady. I forget her name right now, but she had a book. It's titled, Don't Let Your Social Media Footprint Kick You in the Butt. Oh. And what she was trying to communicate was that you're living in a space that's going to follow you all the rest of your life. And if you're serious about school, she's saying, look, you need to know that this is your blueprint. This is who you are. This is your footprint. This is your identity. And when you put it out there, somebody can find you and identify you. And so we need to help our young people to learn and grow in this new space. And I say that as a father. When I put these computers and these powerful instruments in the hands of my children, I need to know what I'm placing in their hands. Yeah. And I'll be honest, we are behind the 8 ball, not really understanding the power of technology and what we're exposing our children to. And so when things happen, it's not just like, oh, I did this thing. No, it's multiplied almost. It can become. And we see that with the cancel culture. We see that with all these other things going on, that people's whole careers can be ruined by one statement, by one. Even Will Smith is trying to recover from one thing, that he did that was put out there. Not I'm saying he only did one thing, but this was like out of character for him. And now everybody's trying, well, what happened to Will? You know what I mean? Well, he had a bad moment. You know what I mean? And we all have bad moments. His was just caught on camera.
But even in that moment, he kind of, unfortunately, epitomizes what's wrong with society and our young people see is
because he taught our young people something.
Yeah, but even the way he's addressing it, you're not going to Chris Rock and saying you're sorry. You send them videos, you send them messages, you doing all this stuff. So it appears, and I say it appears, like you just really focus on your image. I'm not really focused on repairing this relationship. I just want to do what I need to do to get back to where I was. And the other aspect of it is where the village kind of muddles things because you got people, chiming in that really shouldn't be chiming in. That really, some things I think as a community, and I think that's hurt us more than anything else. Some things just because I think it doesn't mean I need to say it, especially to everybody else. And there's some people in a position of power who they know if they say boo, the media's going to pick it up, and they're saying things. Somebody came out and said, well, it's about time that the mask came off. I mean, come on, man. So one moment now the guy had a mask, and I'm just saying, and this is somebody people listen to.
That's good, yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself,
a lot of influence.
Or we talked about this a couple shows. If I had to hear one more time where some woman was talking about it was about time that black men stood up for their women, what you living under a rock? I know a bunch of people. We ain't smacking people, but people ain't coming in and just but we say stuff like that. And I think we need to understand the power of the tongue, actually. And we need to understand that what we see right now is a result of what we're speaking and what we're doing. We model the behavior that our kids are doing right now.
That's it.
I had a workshop with a couple Muslim brothers, and we were having the same discussion. So I asked them the same question: how do you and I go out and tell these young boys to stop fighting each other? And we can't get along. You and I, we fighting, and you telling them, no, y'all ain't supposed to fight. But we doing it. We may not be physically fighting, but we talking about both. Whatever you believe and I believe, how they love us, and it's a God of peace and harmonious. But yet we going back and forth.
It's the state of our city right now.
Yeah, that's a perfect example. Can you imagine if we all got together and said, let's put our Jews, Muslims, Christians, flawless aside, man.
Let's do something powerful together. That's why I said it takes collaboration, but yeah.
But that also confusion feeds the school to prison pipeline. Because if I keep you confused and misdirected, you never deal with the facts that prisons make more money now than a lot of corporations make. They privatize prison. That is easier for our kids to go to prison than it is to go to college.
Yeah.
One state I see now where they're charging prisoners, man. Prisoners, if they don't pay up for their time in jail, that they can't get a driver's license. So my thing is so if I get out of jail and I live in a world, if you don't pay your prison, they're charging you fees to be in prison. If you don't pay your fees, you can't get a driver's license or thing of that nature.
How you gonna lock me up?
They're not asking to be in prison. It's not like a Airbnb.
But because it's a system. It's a system because that's how you systematically keep people down. Because I can't tell Alonzo, if you don't pay child support, I'm gonna lock you up. But I'm sticking all these fees on you when you can't pay it. So now I get out of jail because of child support. My credit's messed up. I can't, I got warrants. So I'm still behind the 8 ball. Nobody's talking about those issues.
Yeah.
We talk about prison itself, but we don't talk about the after effect, and we don't talk about how it's set up. How, you could be, from one demographic, walk down the street with an automatic rifle. Nobody says anything. You could be from another demographic, riding your car, and you look suspicious. The lady who pulled the gun out in King of Prussia Mall. I don't know what the reason, but she used a classic line. I was afraid for my life.
Mm.
But now if somebody else used it, you're going to jail. There's no discussion. So I think that feeds the prison pipeline.
That's it.
But the problem with it is, we talk about it, but how do we deal with it effectively?
Yeah.
When you're talking to politicians, I was talking to the judge today, and one of the things I said, everybody thinks you're going to wave a magic wand and it's going to end. It took years to build this up, and it's going to take years to peel layers back, but you got to get started.
Yeah. So I'm focusing on Philly. So Philly has 130 children in this in a public school. That's not counting charter.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I think is, I think our system is really too big. You know what I mean? And how do you? I don't know if you need to break it down into sections of the city and have superintendents over each section or whatever the case may be. But when you're trying to deal with something that big, and then money is allocated per student. And if you look at our state, the dollars that are allocated towards students in our city, not county, not Montgomery County. Well, Philadelphia is a county, but if you're looking outside of Montgomery County and other counties in Pennsylvania, the dollars change when you get to other counties. So Philly has always gotten less per student than other counties. And so when you look at old dilapidated buildings, you look at all these things going on, you wonder, okay, how can we begin to deal with these basic things that are going on? That says that the institution was built for one reason, and it's still operating in a way that it was built then that's not even functionally correct today. Technology, all these other things have moved ahead, but they're still going into buildings that are outdated. And so I don't think you're ever going to deal with it until you deal with, the value of a child. What do we place a value? How much value do we place on our children?
I just wanted to piggyback on this point real fast, because someone brought up retraining parents.
That's good.
And I was just curious. Now, what does that look like? How do you go about that? What's the first step?
Man, to me, the first step is.
Great question.
Let me start at the beginning. If you have a child in the hospital, just like you got to take a test, you need to be in a parenting class. If you're if you're a young parent and you need to be in a parenting class. At least, I'm not saying a 4-week class, but at least get some basics. Second of all, if your child is a repeat offender, you should be taking a class. Especially if you one of them parents that your child's a repeat offender and you keep showing up blaming everybody else. Well, if so-and-so didn't see him, he wouldn't have got suspended. if Pastor Johnson would have took off that day, it would have never happened. I think you got to put that in place. I think you offer it. It's funny because if you want to adopt somebody, or if they take your child from you, you got to take a class. So if your child is out there committing a crime and you put some kind of interview system in place and you interviewing the parent is not giving the answers, they should take a class. Like the people that mug and killed why are you outside?
That old man.
Why are your kids outside 2 o'clock? First of all, your kids outside 2 o'clock in the morning. Something is wrong with you. A 10-year-old and a 4-year-old, 2 o'clock, and it was a group of them. So it wasn't just one. So those parents, you would be in the class. Because evidently you don't know what it means, child safety. So you have to start doing stuff. You have to start offering stuff. Schools offer these programs, man. Have incentives like, look, hey, you know what? We giving out Dunkin' Donut cards, man, to parents to come take this class. You got a kid in kindergarten, first grade, class 101, why you need to be involved in your child's education. Class 102, you are a role model. And you talking about so when you come up here and you don't,
that might be 101.
Yeah, what I'm saying, but that stuff has to become a part of the educational system.
That's true.
And I want to back up because I've been talking a lot. One thing you said that I agree 200%. They got to start treating our school system like corporations. A corporation, when it gets bigger, and Christian, I'm about to say, they'll branch off and put some so they have the same touch. A church will start cell groups so people can still. So I do agree. And I'll go a step further. Not only they divide the city up, if they got to figure out how, this money that's coming in for these sports teams, that money got to go to these schools. If you want to tax me to build a new stadium, my kid need to get some of that cash. You know what I mean? That stuff needs to start coming. All this vacation revenue that come into the city, a portion of that needs to go to our schools.
That's actually kind of a crazy point, man.
Yeah.
They put out this elaborate plan to build a brand new stadium downtown, but schools are closing, buildings falling
not paying
apart.
teachers.
Like, what's important to this city? We clearly see it. It's not the kids.
Well, it's capitalism at its finest. The problem with it is, it's another all that glitters, because people get so enamored. Well, we don't see the Sixers downtown. Forget that my kids in the school's been failing for the last 10 years.
Kind of what we seeing now, like those kids being out there late, they just wreaking havoc, like, so what's the point of even having these nice things if, it's just craziness around us all the time. I think a point that you made earlier was like, this isn't something that's new. Like, it's been happening for so long and hasn't been addressed that it's reached kind of almost a tipping point.
But it's like training Roxy. If you don't train Roxy not to poop all over the house, why would Roxy not poop all over the house?
Mm-hmm. That's my dog, for those who don't know.
So, well, I said it because Roxy's right here. I say that because we have to begin, for lack of a better term, I'm not going to say coach, invest, in the next generation and begin to teach them skills. You told a story on Sunday about how you had talking to a parent. You need more settings like that. So you come to school to fight, you come to school getting this class.
That's right.
You won't come up in a fight. Guess what? This armed guy's going to escort you to this class, or we locking you up right now. Because that's part of the problem. Nobody's teaching the parents, so they can't teach their kids.
That's right. That's the escalation of situations where something happens in the school, and then you got 4 or 5 cars deep with different family members outside ready to fight over something that happened among kids. And then the police presence is.
But not to cut you off, won't get those same 4 or 5 cars on back to school night.
And I was just ready to say that. Back to school night was just yesterday. We have close to 400 students. We may have maybe 445 parents in the school. But now you coming up and you want to wreak havoc because somebody touched your child. And we want you to say is we need you to be more engaged in those other areas, like you said, because your child may have these other things that they're being labeled with. And those labels just mean they need more support.
But if I'm a principal,
but to the point of that story though, it's like, man, if the child is acting a certain way and you see the 4 or 5 cars pull up, like, you get the idea, like, oh, that's why.
You do, but that's because ignorance. And I'm not saying ignorance in an insulting way. You said it earlier. You can't hold somebody accountable for what they don't know. You don't know what you don't know, but there has to be a process in place, man, where we can now expose people to it. Like for me, if I'm a principal and I got 45 parents, I'm trying to figure out what I can do for those 45 parents who came up here. And people say that's bribery. You know what? Yeah, it's bribery, but it's not for me. It's for the next generation, because if I got to get somebody a $10 Dunkin' Donuts card and now I can talk to them about their kids' behavior, I can impact another generation. Maybe I can stop little Johnny from going to jail. Maybe I can stop little Johnny from becoming a drug dealer. Maybe I can let little Johnny realize that, dude, you can live to past 18. Because I find myself having this conversation. So what if you do live past 18? You got no skills, no job, no way to take care of yourself.
So, I was talking to a teacher. A student was standing outside the door, knocking on the door. I said, man, I see this student in the hallway all the time. And so I went and talked to her. I was like, what's going on? Well, she had other students that she needed to instruct. And I said, well, how come he doesn't want to stay in the class? He's in the 8th grade and he can't read. And so she's trying to figure out a tool that will actually read to him, that will keep him engaged so she can keep him in the classroom. But as long as she can't find that tool, which technology will allow her to do, then she's saying he's just lost right now. And he's 8th grade, getting ready to go to high school. And so my heart breaks, because if you can't read and you just in school, walking around the building, he's not going to stay in a classroom. No. We're fortunate he will stay in the building all day long, but we have a lot of students like that. Let me say, when most of our students, in fact, when I was working as a youth pastor and one of my students graduated at the top of his class at Martin Luther King High School, I had to remind him in stern terms. I said, look, don't think when you get to college that you're prepared for college.
Oh, yeah. Good one.
And then after his first semester, he called me and he said, I was offended when you told me that because he was getting good grades and he was killing it. But he said, when I got there, I realized that the education that I got in the Philadelphia Public School was inferior to his colleagues that were around him. And with him getting that inferior education, he began to have an inferiority complex that he didn't belong at college. And I was like, no, you belong there. You just, everything you're going to learn, you just didn't learn it in the classroom in school. Now you got to hit the books. Everything that you didn't get, you got to now be determined to learn those things because you can learn them, especially with technology now. But a lot of students aren't driven like that. A lot of young people aren't driven like that, and they need support. So I'm grateful that he made it through and he matriculated through high school and graduated. But that's still not even the end of the deal, because what we're giving him. Look, like I said, I worked at Central, and what I'm trying to do is expose the students at this middle school to say, I want you to put Central on your, like, why shouldn't you want to go to Central? And then we started looking at their scores, and we realized that they're either proficient, below basic, or whatever the case may be. Well, that rules them out already. So I'm saying we start talking about this equity thing, equity. And I'm like, okay, we're talking about equity. Let's start looking at these tests and start talking about how we can give some students from some of these hard neighborhoods an opportunity to be exposed to better, especially if they live right in the same neighborhood of the particular magnet school that people are coming from all over the city going to. Right. So we're not having these hard conversations, and we don't want to dumb it down. Like, we don't want Central to dumb down its standards. We want to raise the standards of the neighborhood schools. And how that happens is we have to have a collaborative effort between all that work that needs to be done with parents, all that work that needs to be done with students, supporting educators.
And grandparents now.
Grandparents. It just takes a lot. It's good, and there's no easy answer. I think you said it. We didn't get here overnight, so you ain't gonna fix it overnight. It's gonna be a journey. It's gonna be a commitment. It's gonna be a long walk. We've been doing this for how long now? Working with children and families, and we probably feel like it's gotten worse because, like you said, we're now dealing with the students that we stood in the classroom. We're looking at their children and some of their grandchildren.
Well, it's ironic because I feel like I have to work harder now than I did before. And it's because it is a generational thing. Because I am combating, sometimes two, 3 generations. Yeah. Because grandpa's in jail, dad's in jail, uncle's in jail. That's the culture. I never forget when I was at Ben Franklin and I was in there, Tony and I. You remember Tony? Mm-hmm. And we were Ben Franklin. We talked to these young men, and they said something I never forgot. We were talking about fatherhood and responsibility. And so somebody said, he raised his hand. He said, well, let me ask you a question. He said, I hear you, because he goes to church. I go to church after my father. I come to school, talk with the 4 fathers. He said, man, look around this room. None of us got no fathers. Mm. He said, look around this room. He said, raise your hand if you got a father. Nobody raised their hand. So he was like, well, what am I supposed to compare that to? Mm. What am I supposed to compare it to? And I say that because if enough of us don't get back into the fight, because there's times when I know I'm not, but there's times when I feel like I'm by myself. I feel like I'm having the same conversation with this person. And Chris talked about this. We talked a little bit about this yesterday or earlier today. What do you do when you go home that nobody's reinforcing it, and you got to hit it again the next day. You just got to keep hitting it, man. Yeah. You got to keep hitting it and keep believing and keep praying. Yeah, go
just ahead. Say one. I know we running out of time. And I know Cosby has had some problems, but I think we miss how groundbreaking his show was at the particular time. I read somewhere that the gang violence went down in Chicago when the Cosby Show came on at that time in the 80s because they were sitting home looking at it thinking, you got to be kidding me. That's how mind-blowing it was for them to be able to sit and see a black family. Well, I vividly remember us taking clips into the school. Yeah. But for me, it was personal because I thought it was a myth too until I went into a middle-class black church. And when I walked into that middle-class black church, I felt like, where have you guys been?
Yeah.
Like,
good question.
Like it's this whole community that is dying that are looking for models, looking for people. And I got that exposure because, you know, I became a Christian. I came out to Christ, and I got exposed to a middle-class back church where I saw husbands loving their wives and children and everything. But I didn't even think it was real until it was exposed to me. And there are a lot of students that are never exposed to it. The closest they come to it is their teacher. And if their teacher doesn't open them up to what's going on in their life, they're just their teacher.
Some of these teachers, man,
you know what I mean?
Deal with the same issues.
And they keep them at arm's base. Some of them are afraid of students. And when you become afraid of a student, it's hard to teach that student.
But you also have teachers who come from broken homes. You have teachers who are dealing with wounds that they don't even realize they're dealing with. You know, and a lot of times, you know, one thing I tell my guys, you know, about be careful,
Mm-hmm.
you know, when you start judging people.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of times you're judging yourself. You know, I'm looking at Alonzo, I'm judging him, but I'm judging him because he brought up a sore spot in my own life. And I've never dealt with it. And I think a lot of teachers deal with that face to face because I never dealt with the fact that I was a foster kid. I never dealt with the fact, you know, that I come from a broken home. And now I got a whole class full of people that remind me every day. Me every day of where I come from. And they're broken. So when you're broken, you know, everything around you is dealt with from the lens of a broken person.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I know y'all going to say something, but this is my Jesus moment. I got to get this in every show. No, I think
this is the moment.
I think people fail to realize, and I say this all the time, that you know, through Jesus is where healing takes place, which is why they don't want you talking about it in school, which is why they don't want you talking about it in government. And I think it's through Jesus that people can begin holistic healing. You know, not just go to rehab. Like I had this conversation with some of my guys. I tell them, I think my opinion why rehab fails a lot of times is because you deal with what's going on right now. You deal with the drug issue, but you don't deal with why they got on the issue. So
good.
If I got on that issue because my wife is getting on my nerves and then I'm going back home, well, what do you think is going to happen? if I got on the issue because I can't deal with my kids and I go back home, what do you think is going to happen? So they teach you all this great stuff when I'm talking to my guys, and I think it's great. But when you dig in, you tell me I need to be a good dad. I don't know what that means. Mm-hmm. You're telling me I need to be a good husband. My wife won't let me be a good husband. How do I deal with that? Because I'm not going to tell my friends, you know. So drugs is my escape. I think we got to dig deeper, and I think that's what's happening. We have people in positions who need to be healed themselves, who are broken, you know. And you know, I say it all the time, man. If it, you know. But for the grace of God, you know, God, there I go.
There you go.
I mean, and like I didn't know about your addiction until I read, you know, when I read your bio, you know, but most people don't know that, you know, it's no lie when Jesus says, I will never leave you nor forsake you. Mm-hmm. You know, I know it sounds like a cliche and people say it, but that is the one constant that I can say I've had 38 years I've been married, through the years of my kids, through all the stuff I know, who gave me wisdom when I was dumb as a bag of rocks. And I think that's what's missing because people don't believe in anything anymore. And I think most people I encounter don't believe in anything, don't even believe in themselves. And that, again, feeds the prisoner pipeline because if I don't believe in myself, I'm always trying to please somebody. So if Alonzo comes along and tells me it's okay to do drugs, I'm on it.
Yep. If
Devin comes and tells me it's okay for me to have 15 kids, I'm on it. So I think we got to get back to that again. We got to get back to, you know, one, building relationships. And you said it, not talking at these kids, but having a conversation with, even sometimes that it means they're going to say some stuff we don't like.
Right. And that's what I was going to, we just got to be willing to have tough conversations. Like, I think people just kind of let things go or go under the rug. And then it gets to this, again, this point where now we have problems. I think as a community as a whole, like we have to be better at holding each other accountable and just being able to talk about kind of the things that we're talking about here today in front of you.
But just remember where you came from. I think it's a simple formula, man. Remember where you came from. You know, in biblical terms. Don't forget the former things. Because, none of us were perfect. And I think we forget where we came from. We put up this pedestal. We put up this goal that's impossible for people to reach. And I think for me, I never forgot where I came from. We were talking about on Monday, you know, I think Monday was a purposeful leader. You know, and we talked about, you know, is a scripture that nobody ever talks about leadership that kind of it kind of cracks me up. But we talk about when Jesus is in the garden, and he has to take that, he got to get ready, man. He said, yo, God, basically, yo, but if it's your will,
Not my will.
And what I was explaining to him, but that's leadership when you got to do something for the greater good that's going to make you uncomfortable. That is the essence of true leadership.
Mm-hmm.
He knew it was going to make him more than uncomfortable, but he knew it was for the greater good of all of us. And I think that's the attitude we got to get back to Chris's point so we can start to chip away at this stuff. We got to make decisions that's for the greater good.
Mm-hmm.
Not because somebody got a turban or something wrapped around their head or they wearing garb or, I personally don't like them. We got to start making decisions saying that we got a generation, man, that's dying off.
Yeah.
That's so true.
We got a generation, man, that's going to produce another toxic generation.
Mm-hmm.
Absentee dads from when I was doing it 20 years ago to now has gotten no better. And the only reason numbers are close is because fewer people are getting married.
That's true.
That's the part people forget. Yeah, when I dug in, I'm like, man, these numbers didn't move a lot. And then I looked at that's because fewer people getting married now. So they're not counting them.
Yep.
So there's so many things that we have to unpeel. We got to go through the layers to get to. But it comes back to, you got to know who you are, man. And you got to know to whom you belong. And when you figure that out, I think that's the start of a foundation that'll break this school to prison pipeline. And I think the government on purpose, they don't want you to know who you are.
Mm-hmm.
You got every year we're going to invest money in the education system. We don't.
Mm-hmm.
We don't. Wow, because we know education is really key, and not just education academically. Teach somebody how to live. We got a workshop on Saturday. Stop surviving and start living. That's the form that we got. We teach everybody.
They definitely intentionally keep us separated.
Yes,
it's strength in numbers when we come together.
But they think it's
like
cute.
We're able to get things done. So they of course love for us to kind of bicker and come together and find common ground.
They make it think it's cute. Our kid can't count to 10, but they can twerk. Seriously, I mean, the kid can barely spell their name, but they know every rap song that come on the radio.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny
and we're taking
Devin
pictures.
I actually watched the video. Devin and I watched this video. Like, they don't know common things.
Yes.
And you ask them what continent we're on, and like, oh my God, some of the answers that you get are mind blowing.
Or like what country's border?
We're a little over.
Like
I asked some kids. I said, "Hey, we were talking to a group of kids, and we were in Camden. New Jersey, and I said, what state is the Liberty Bell in?" And they were like, New Jersey. I said, no, it's not. It's in Philadelphia. Isn't Philadelphia, New Jersey the same state?
Wow.
I'm like, no, when you cross the bridge, you go into a different state. Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. They don't, the little basic stuff that we knew. I'm just telling you, the basic stuff we knew, how many stripes on the flag? How many stars on the flag? They didn't know any of that stuff.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, I had adults and I had adults who didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's the basic stuff that they don't. And when you don't know the basic stuff and you just touched on it, how can you be confident in life, man? When you sit in the classroom and everybody knows basic stuff but you,
you're gonna run from that, man. You're gonna run from that.
And then there's nothing you can do in this world where you got to know how to read to do everything now. I mean, some of them have pictures, but you got to be able to read.
Mm-hmm.
And I think and we'll take a few more minutes. I think we have to get back to the point where at least we start having these kind of discussions. But it has to be, this discussion is not going to end with just setting up another meeting with what some of the solutions we can take away.
That's it. Yeah. That's it.
We just ain't going to keep meeting and have a meeting.
Yeah.
This money like all this money make off of fantasy football, put some of that in these schools.
Mm-hmm.
You legalize gamble, put some of that in these schools. We got schools where kids don't have laptops, computers, man. You know what? You got these folk blowing billions of dollars for these lies they telling on TV.
Casinos, all types of stuff.
You know what? I haven't got a name for it, the Pinocchio law. You tell a lie on TV, I'm fining you $10,000. That $10,000 going to the school pot. But there's so many ways they could find to generate revenue for something else. They're building this arena for Madden football for EA Sports.
They building it where?
Yeah, it's gonna be in Philly. They're gonna build it in Philly for EA Sports because that's how big it is. Because you can, but but you don't have money to invest in the school.
Yeah,
you got.
But I think that's on us as a community where we got to step up and be like, hey, we don't want this. Put that money into our school. I think like we're too quiet in our neighborhoods. We just allow these things to happen.
Yeah,
but we don't know any better. But we don't know any. And I'm not making an excuse, but they tell us just enough. Mm-hmm. Just enough. I used to go to the school board meetings, and and you sit in there, and I never forget when they were going to close Martin Luther King. And this is so sad, but it's hilarious. When they were not talking about converting Martin Luther King over to a particular organization was going to run the school. Mm-hmm. And so somebody stands up for the organization and they talk about all the deficiencies and how they're going to fix them. And, they're not going to change the name of the school and understand and everything. And, but these are certain things we need to change. So First Lady stand up and said, I hear all that, but we can't, I don't want to do it because what's going to happen is, y'all going to close this door and my daughter's going to had to go for prom from another school.
Oh my goodness!
Next lady stands up and says, "Yeah, y'all came here and y'all put that funny poem on the side of the building. We ever heard of that guy?" So somebody leaned over to me and said, "It's Langston Hughes." So I'm just saying. So these are the parents. But I was saying, and we were trying not to laugh on our side of the room, but these are the things that we argue about.
Yeah.
Not about the school was failing or kids are not graduating, teachers not showing, all this other stuff we don't argue about, and that feeds the prison pipeline. Mm-hmm. And the sad part about it, that's the part that get televised. They don't televise their parents to get up there and say, I want a better school for my kid. I want my kid to get an education. We got the person talking about the prom. My kid got to catch 2 buses now instead of 1, which means they got to wake up early. All this nonsense is the stuff from our community, and that's what we feed into.
I'm in the Pathway to Leadership program with Temple University. And one of the things that one of my professors said, because she was working in the district for a long time, and she says, I never worked at a school that I wouldn't put my child in. And if I didn't want to put my child in it, my goal was to make that a school that I would want to put my child in. And as she said that, I thought, you know what? What she's saying is so true. And I thought, a lot of us work in these schools, and if we're working at a school that we don't feel like we would put our own child in, what we're doing is we're nothing more than prison guards. Because we're saying that this is not a place that I want my child to go. And the most dreadful place for me as a father that I would ever want to be, my child or children to never be, is to visit them in prison. And so it breaks my heart that you at a place and you say, okay, what's the goal? I want it to be a place that I would put my grandchild and my child in. If in any of my child was like, this is a place for them. And to be honest, we have a lot of places like that in our city where we would put our child in. And I don't want to sound insulting or harsh or anything like that, or speak down on a dog. But some of us wouldn't even leave our dog there because we think our dog might not make it out safe. You know what I mean? And so if we've lowered the standard that much, we have a lot of work to do. And I agree with you, we're not putting enough pressure on politicians. They come up with this plan and they say, in another 5 years, we're going to have air conditioners in all Philadelphia public schools. Another 5-year plan. You know what's going to happen in 3 years? Some of them jokers that came up with that plan is not going to be there, and the can is going to get kicked down the road. It's not going to be high priority again.
They was scared me because I could see them with fans and ice cubes. Man. After the last ventilation system they came up with, I can say that because I don't work for the school district. I don't know who came up with that plan, but that was straight. That was straight out of Little Rascals. That was. They took a Kmart fan and a piece of wood and stuck it in the window and called it the ventilation system. I'm like, what? I said, that's like the brothers in the hood. They take a Volkswagen and put a BMW emblem on the front.
So yeah.
I don't mean to laugh, but
it's a mess.
Yeah. We got 5 minutes, man. We over, so let's wrap up in 5 minutes, man. No, but I on a more serious note. Mm-hmm. I think it all comes back down to leadership. And that's my new thing is make sure because I'm on too many calls about leadership and they don't address leadership. Mm-hmm. I'm on too many calls where everybody's talking about leadership, but nobody's invested in somebody else to help them become a better leader. And to me, leadership is when somebody's working with you or around you and they rise above you because they should. And I tell my 3 kids this all the time. They should be able to take what I got, what I have, and what they have, and go above me. not in a condescending way, because they know more than I know. They can combine and I'm sure you should feel the same about your kids. All the mistakes and stuff you made, you can share with them what you learned, and they can take what they know about this culture, and they should achieve more. And we have to get back to that. And then also, as in my last point, and I'll turn it over for closing, we got to start putting expectations on our kids. Not for them all to be Albert Einstein, but graduating high school is free. It's free. Learning how to read is free. We got to start, as parents, listen to me, parents, you got to start putting expectations on your kids. That my kids knew the expectations. You go to school, do the best you can. That was an expectation that they all understood. I never once said you had to get straight A's and, I'm not going to beat you to death if you come in with a B, but they knew the expectations. I think now these kids don't have any expectations, man. There were 3 things I was afraid of growing up: going to jail, the police, and my parents. And my parents probably was the number one thing. Because if I ever went to jail, I'd be like, you keep me for a little bit. Because I know when my parents come get me. But I think, so that's what we got to get. So we go around and, I'll save you for last, Pastor Johnson. Devin and Chris, you guys want to give a quick closing statement?
Yeah. I mean, something that was said that when I first came in was just about kind of, that I think is key or important, is like, when it comes to working with our kids, it's definitely going to take all of us. This is a community effort. Like, it's not just going to be on the parents. It's not just the teachers. It's really collectively all of us have to come together, find common ground, which is our kids, and we want them to be successful and have bright futures. So I think what we're doing in terms of having this show and continue to bring people on, like that's our goal, and this is a piece of it. But, from here, I think we just got to continue to have some of these tough conversations and get with the appropriate people. Another thing that we said, too, we need to start pressuring our politicians. Like, we can't just keep accepting these plans of, like, hey, the stadium will be here in 5 years, And they're talking about air conditioning in 5 years, and that'll get pushed back. So it's just like, it is collectively our community, man. We have to step up and start to make these changes ourselves, and we can't expect to wait for anybody to come save us.
That's good.
Yeah, and just to reiterate and piggyback on that, putting pressure on these politicians, and like you said, just not accepting a 5-year plan. In 3 years, someone else is getting reelected and it's going.
Right, yeah.
Also, and like you said, taking accountability, holding some of these parents accountable, and having those tough conversations. There's different methods you could do to get better at having tough conversations, but it's something that definitely needs to be had.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
You, sir?
Yeah. Okay. Well, this has been a great conversation, and I hope that we just haven't kicked around and talked about an issue that's real, but as Chris said, it's going to take a collaborative effort, and we need more community partnerships. But I do think it boils down to what Chris Sr. said. It's going to take leadership. The leadership void has to be filled. And I think it's going to take some people standing in a gap and doing some things that they wouldn't normally do to reach communities. Philadelphia is a city of neighborhoods, and we have to support some of these neighborhood schools and help them to become better than they were last week or last year. And so that's going to take all of us working together with families, with educators and administrators. Politicians are going to have to be held to the fire, because together we can do this. But I think you said it, Chris Jr., they keep us separate intentionally, because if we work together, we can make some changes. So I hope that this conversation has reminded us that we need each other. We're stronger together.
There you have it. Another episode of Above Average Black Men. Our special guest, Pastor Alonzo Johnson. See you next week. Same time, same channel.
Like, follow, subscribe, share, comment, interact with us. We need that.
We do need that. Appreciate you guys. Take care.
All right, man. Let me know about tomorrow.